What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with another edition of Unleashed, the weekly panel discussion show. We had a big pay-per-view over the weekend, so we decided we're going to bring a big guest, a good friend of the show. You know him very well from MMA On Point, and you've seen him on this panel quite a few times before. Always a pleasure to have my friend Jason Hartley. Jason, what's going on, my man? How you doing?
Yeah, man, it's good to be back. I really enjoy doing these things. So, yeah, it's a good time. We got a lot to talk about today, so I think it'll be fun. Yeah.
Let's see what Jason performs like without the White Claw this time. So next, we're going to introduce the jack of all trades who's mastered them all. You know this man very, very well. As you see him join with me every week. He is the senior editor of Sherdog.com. Mr. Ben Duffy. Ben, what's going on, brother?
I'm doing really well. I'm just ready to see how the new high and dry Jason Hartley performs. You know, all eyes on him today.
Sober Hartley will be quite the enigma. All right, so here we go. We're going to now introduce the man who anchors the panel every week. He's got the stats, the facts, the numbers, and the figures. He is the associate editor of Sherdog.com, also a good friend, Jay Petru. Jay, what's going on, my man?
So I'm really curious, is Sober Hartley like a motivated BJ Penn or like a Chuck with his look in his eye? Where are we going to put him on the pantheon?
Or is it post-USADA Hendricks?
Is it like really or like 70%, or was it 70% Hendricks or 30% Usman or one of those guys?
Post Wheaties Pettis.
Post Wheaties Pettis. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I think that's gonna. We got a lot to figure out today. So let's go with the stat of the week. The stat of the week is 4, because Poland is now the 4th country to have both a male and a female UFC champion throughout UFC history, because Jan Blachowicz is the Polish light heavyweight champion, and Jan Jacek was the strawweight champion in the women's divisions. The U.S. first had Ken Shamrock, because the super fight title matters, guys. Ronda Rousey. Brazil had Marila Bustamante and Amanda Nunes, and the Netherlands had Bas Rutten and Jermaine Durandamy. So Poland is now Polish power. What's up?
Well, the Netherlands really gets the short end of that stick to have the two of the shortest title reigns in UFC history. But that's a whole nother story. But we have a lot to talk about. UFC 253 was live Saturday, the first of a 5-week stint at Fight Island in Abu Dhabi. Israel Adesanya completely dominated Paulo Costa in the main event, retaining the middleweight title. I believe that finish came in the second round via your pick of whatever solid strikes landed and wobbled the challenger. But with such a fantastic win, Israel Adesanya is now feeling like he's in rarefied air. We're getting a sense of greatness around him. If you didn't feel it previously, I'm sure you feel it now. But we're going to start this off with a swing or miss for you fellas. And Jason, perhaps I'll start with you on this one. Swing or miss. Adesanya is now the 2nd greatest middleweight champion in UFC history.
Yeah, this is a bit of an unpopular opinion, but I still do think, I think Chris Weidman, what he's done for the sport is really great. He was part of the New York transition, being in there trying to lobby for us to get in New York when that still wasn't legal. He was there at the signing. He's a very important figure in terms of trying to push the sport forward during a rough time there. But I still do think that Silva is the one who lost those fights that he had. The leg injury, it's kind of a freak injury. I still look at it like that. Yes, he did check it, but how many checked leg kicks have you seen in your lifetime, and how many of them end in a broken shin, And then when it comes to the clowning in the first fight, it's just hard for me to put those wins over the kind of wins that Adesanya has. And if that was number 2, Adesanya, I think, comfortably moves in ahead of him. So I think it's really, really hard to argue against the idea that he's the 2nd greatest ever. So I'm a big fan of his positioning at number 2.
Not a bad set of rationale there. And I'm also glad to know that there is at least one other person in the world who felt the Silva-Weidman fights were incomplete. Like, it just felt like there was just a lot left on the table, and both very strange things to end those fights. But Jay, Ben, what are your thoughts on this? Is Israel Adesanya the 2nd greatest middleweight champion in UFC history in your eyes?
Well, on the UFC 253 roundtable for Sherdog, we actually had this question come up in a different form, and I was caught off guard, and I kind of rolled with it. And then I got to thinking as soon as I finished answering the question, going, well, I'm wrong. So let me figure out how I can get there. Adesanya's title reign has been I don't know. I don't know what to make of it because the Yoel Romero fight was not. I mean, obviously, it started with Kelvin Gastelum for the interim title, and then he sparked Robert Whittaker to unify the belts. Defended against Yoel Romero in that like Anderson Silva, Talis Lightis kind of fight. So hey, they got a similarity, another one there, and then the Costa beatdown. So I don't think I don't even know if I'm ready to put him in the top 3. I mean, you got to think of Dave Monet. No, okay, but honest and truly, Rich Franklin had I mean, Nate Corey versus Yoel Romero as your first challenger. You know, historically or otherwise, you have to think Yoel Romero would be favored higher just as an all-time middleweight. But at the same time, Nate Corey was on a 3-fight knockout streak while Yoel Romero had lost his last 2 fights. And so, you know, that kind of context matters. And then Franklin for his next defense completely butchered David Loazo. Like, hey, maybe you guys should stop this fight kind of stoppage. Like, I think it was a 50-42 at the end of the day. One of those just all-time beatdowns that Franklin had. And then I think Weidman is above them. I still think that even though we have the Silva fights there, his fight with Lyoto Machida, I was actually in San Francisco at the time, on vacation while studying for the bar. That's a whole different story. And it was an all-time great back and forth. Ooh, this is going to be close. Can Machida pull it off in the 5th round fight? And then the Vitor beatdown. I think as far as reigns go, I think I still have Adesanya has some more room to go. So I'm going to miss on that one. I think that there are questions, and there's probably a question that we might ask very shortly about what the heck the UFC does with him. Like, do they rematch him with Paulo Costa because of stuff that happened after the fight and because Paulo Costa wants the rematch because reasons? I'm not ready to anoint him the king that would the uncrowned king of all middleweights yet, but give him a couple years.
Okay, fair enough. Ben, what's your take? Swing or miss? Adesanya is the number 2 of the all-time great middleweight champions in UFC history.
I still think number 2 has to be Weidman, even with the bit of smoke and mirrors that there is there. But I would say it takes Adesanya one more win over a deserving challenger in uncontroversial fashion, and he's number 2, like, clearly for me. Like, he's almost there right now.
I'm gonna side with Jason on this one. I think he's a comfortable number 2, and I say that because obviously skill-wise, he far surpasses Chris Weidman. I think Chris Weidman at his prime against Adesanya, I don't think Weidman gets out on that one very, very easily. We've seen what Adesanya can do against elite grapplers. We've seen how he's been able to nullify them. We see what he's like on the feet and how incredible and dynamic he is, and next level his striking technique is. But also the quality of the wins based on the opponents at the times that they were in their careers, along with the nature of the wins or the fights themselves. So counting the interim title fight, the Kelvin Gastelum fight is one of the all-time greats, hands down. That's a fight that's going to stand the test of time. Then to absolutely annihilate Robert Whittaker in the fashion that he did, without a broken leg, without any clowning around, without any sort of asterisk that you can put next to it, speaks for itself. Yoel Romero, while it may not have been the most aesthetically pleasing to most people, it was a fight where he was presented with a very dangerous style, and he handled it very effectively, shut Yoel down, and there was essentially nothing Romero can do aside from sticking his tongue out, and we know how the judges score that. So then to go in and add the first defeat on a previously undefeated killer's record in Paulo Costa, I think that puts him ahead of Weidman's first defeat against Anderson with the clowning around knockout, then the broken leg. Then I think Vitor was after that, if I'm not mistaken, or was it Machida?
It was Machida then. Belfort.
Okay, yeah. So Machida, which was a great fight, but I think the Gastelum win surpasses that as far as the type of fight it was. And then you put the Belfort fight, and that was, quite frankly, a very deflated version of Vitor Belfort that answered the bell there, since that was right after the TRT ban. So I do think there is room to consider Chris Weidman the number 2 there, and I'm not to say that opinion is wrong, but I think Adesanya is doing what Weidman did on a higher level. And then also too, if you want to factor in, I think Jason made an excellent point there about what he's done for the sport. So Chris Weidman was instrumental in getting MMA legal in New York, and he deserves his just due for that. I will counter that by saying that Israel Adesanya's impact as far as the overall sport we have yet to feel. If was he or Usman the first African-born champion? It was within a couple of weeks of each other that those belts were won. So, in fact, I think it was right. I think Usman was first. Usman was like a few weeks before. But still, to open up an entirely untapped market for the UFC, to expose the sport to an entire continent that is filled with talent, we have not felt that impact just yet. That's something that we can talk about in the next 5 to 10 years of African-born fighters and what they're able to do in the UFC. So I think Adesanya gets the number 2 over Chris Weidman, all-time great middleweights. All right, fellas. So while we're talking about Adesanya and what he has accomplished so far, now it's time to talk about what's next for him. What do you see next for him, gentlemen? Where do you think Israel Adesanya goes? Where does his next challenge lie? And who do you think could possibly dethrone him at this point?
I don't think there's anybody in the middleweight division in the UFC right now that would even be a plausible call to dethrone him. He called for Cannonier if Cannonier can get past Whitaker. I like that as Cannonier just being a very deserving challenger. You know, he'll have done everything he needs to do to deserve that shot. He certainly brings some weapons and threats to the table, but so did Costa. And Adesanya just made him look like a complete amateur. So we may just already be in that spot where he just needs to fight the most deserving guy. It's going to become a numbers game where we'll look back at his career maybe and say, hey, you know, for that 5-year span, he defended this title 7 times, 8 times. Maybe he breaks Silva's record and we're talking about 11 times. And not all of them were world beaters. Not all of them were, this is, you know, the greatest title fight in UFC history. But he beat the best, most deserving guy time in and time out again and just completely styled on him for years. I mean, that's already the kind of conversation I think we need to have about Adesanya. I'd like to see Mousasi come back to the UFC and give him a crack.
That sounds like a hell of a fight. I'd love to see that. And you know what, Ben, I'm glad you pivoted there because that's kind of the direction that I was thinking we'd go on this one about what's next for Adesanya. How close are we to getting to a point where we're simply slotting a body into that challenger position and this card is being sold on Israel Adesanya's charisma and star power? Like, at what point are we looking at an Anderson Silva prime situation? Are we looking at Shevchenko in the flyweight division? Or is that what we're seeing right now, gentlemen?
I think we're kind of in a real crossroads because unlike divisions like lightweight and welterweight and featherweight, where there are a glut of potential contenders, there isn't really a standout right now because there's a lot of head-to-head losses along the way. That makes it difficult. Like Darren Till obviously is behind Robert Whitaker. Jared Cannonier knocked out Jack Hermanson. Yoel Romero's all way off the table. Jack Hermanson just tapped out Kelvin Gastelum, so it's a lot of parity there. So hold on a second. Sorry about that. So we're in a real odd position for who can fight this guy next because everyone has lost a fight recently. So it almost will be we should have another contender. And I think I took issue with the marketing of this event because there were a lot of media members included saying that one of the most important middleweight title fights ever. No, it's not. No, it's not. Paulo Costa hits really hard. He's shown he's undefeated. He's 13-0. He's done some cool things. He's knocked out some people that aren't knocked out very often. But is this an all-time legacy-making, he'll be the best ever if you get past him kind of situation? No. And that's really too bad, because every title fight doesn't have to be the most important, most challenging, most devastating so-and-so fight that the UFC can put together. And I think the UFC keeps pigeonholing itself into trying to make amazing, crazy title fights when they've kind of lost the script a little bit. And that's really too bad, because we start having these conversations of who's next for this fighter. Because who's next for this fighter should be the next ranked fighter who's on a win streak that deserves the next title shot. Adesanya has only fought, seven guys in the division? I mean, out of the top guys, he's fought Whitaker, he's fought Costa, Romero, Brunson, and Gastelum. There are a bunch of other names that are still on the list for potential guys to fight. And that's how it should be. Like, if he's going to smoke them all, great. But I feel like the UFC is already preparing for us as fans and media to poo-poo the matchups and go, well, it's not a Costa fight, so it doesn't matter. Valentina Shevchenko has to fight Jennifer Maia. Oh, no big deal. That's whatever. It's over. Hey, Jennifer Maia earned the shot by beating JoJo. She tapped her with an armbar. She deserves the next shot. So I think that UFC needs to just get back to normal. Why do we have to be the biggest, craziest, most bombastic thing ever? I feel like, and this is totally not ever going to happen, that we should get back to more of these sport tournament development kind of ways instead of this crazy matchmaking that we keep having these days.
You know what, Jason, I know you probably got something to say on this one, so I'm going to throw this out to add to whatever points you want to make here. Do you agree with me, or are you wrong, Jason? Was the idea that Paulo Costa was beating Israel Adesanya, was that just totally out of left field? Was that an idea that really should not have even been introduced into this narrative? From my perspective, it just looked like a horrible style matchup that, quite frankly, Costa showed himself completely inequipped to handle. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, I think it's the classic statement of, you kind of brawl a technical striker. And if you're a technical striker, you kind of want to outbox the brawler. It's kind of one versus the other. And I don't think anybody going into the fight thought that there was any kind of technical pairing that would say, like, oh yeah, if we're going to straight compare their jabs, or we're going to straight compare the kind of shots and the setups and the feints that they do, that we're going to put Costa anywhere near Israel Adesanya there. I think the thing is, when you watched, something like the Yoel fight, which actually had Yoel winning, by the way, but the one thing that you were impressed by from that fight is, A, it was close, so I'm not mad at the fact that he did get the decision. B, he just didn't care that he was getting hit by one of the best knockout artists, you could argue, in the UFC, because when Yoel lands a shot, he tends to put people out. And he just didn't care, He famously did the whole salute thing and then punched him right after it, that was what I thought the first round would look like, but I thought that would have quickly caught up with him. And I thought by the second round, the cracks would have started to show already by the end of the first round. I just didn't think it would be as dramatic. And a lot of people have criticized his game plan. I actually pushed back on that. I think that was actually Adesanya making it to where he couldn't get on the inside. He made it to where he played at Adesanya's range. And so I don't actually think it was Costa not wanting to get on the inside. He just could never get started in the first place. And Adesanya basically pushed him back into first gear. But in terms of, next contenders and who can actually come out, I actually think it's a very line. Like, if you look down the line, it's a very far fall is what I would say. So, like, Cannonier Whitaker, I actually think that's a decent thing to go with. I think Cannonier is actually a good matchup. I think that's the best call out he could possibly make right now. And I actually favor Cannonier to win that fight. I don't really care for Till or Hermanson, just because I think they probably need another win after that. But who did they even fight after they beat each other? So that's a weird position. And then when you look behind it, if there's anything that's a detriment to the strength of schedule that Adesanya's had, is he basically picked off his own contenders before he even got the belt. Somebody like Brunson just coming in, beating Shabazian, massive prospect. How interesting is that fight really if those two end up fighting again, because he already beat him? Of course, he already beat Yoel. He decided not to wait and fight Yoel anyway earlier this year, so there's a contender picked off there. And then, of course, he's already beaten Robert, and just kind of falls farther and farther down the line with guys like Kelvin, so I think it's a really weird kind of place. And I don't mind Jones being inserted in that situation for that reason.
Yeah, I guess that's a good enough segue as we can have here, because we mentioned Jones, the now former light heavyweight champion. Still kind of strange to say those words together, former light heavyweight champion and Jon Jones, but we can safely say that now because there is no longer a vacancy at the top of the 205 mountain, and that is occupied by one Jan Blachowicz, who was able to knock out Dominic Reyes in the second round. Gentlemen, have we entered the Blachowicz era, or is this going to be, pre-Jones, the revolving door, sort of the hot potato of the UFC title belt passed around at light heavyweight?
Well, considering that he's probably going to fight the winner of Thiago Santos versus Glover Teixeira, I favor him over either of those guys. I think Santos is probably the one that's getting out of that one, and I slightly favor Blachowicz in that fight. We might have a little bit of an era. I mean, I think he'll be champ 6 months from now. It's as long as the Machida era was.
Yeah, if you don't mind me jumping in on that. Well, Thiago obviously already beat him. So for me, I mean, it's pretty hard to take somebody in the rematch, although Jan just came off of one of those rematches with Corey Anderson, and Corey Anderson couldn't even get his wrestling game going. He just completely shut it down. It's really interesting that, they're really both middleweights who, came up to light heavy, and it'll be interesting to see them up against each other in their final form, as we want to call this. I'm not sure. But I picked against Jan in all of his last fights, all of them. Picked against him in Luke Rockhold. Jacare, for some reason, I don't know why I picked against him in the Jacare fight, considering he was also middleweight who came up. But, it's just one of these things where I still see Thiago winning him for the fourth time. As dumb as it is, I'm going to pick against him, I think. And I like Jones coming back down. I think Jones thinks he can win that match. I think he sees a slower striker, and I think he's been vocal about that already, and I think that's why he wants that fight. And I think he might actually do it if they book Stipe versus Ngannou. He's like, well, I've already been on the layoff since, March now? February, actually. So why wait? Let me just go back down, get my belt back again. I can vacate again like GSP or whatever, and just go back up to heavyweight, So I think it really just depends on what they book for heavyweight next.
I'm not feeling the Jan Blachowicz era, and that isn't to speak ill of him because he's done great things. I didn't have him winning the Dominic Reyes fight. I did not. I did not. It was not going to be that competitive of a fight. I just thought it was going to, Reyes was going to kick him in the head, do that thing he does, but he didn't. He did not, and it was fascinating to see how Jan Blachowicz, who seemed slower, he seemed more measured, and I mean, he seemed 39 or so. I think he's getting up there, and he's got a lot of miles on him. 37. Anyway,
in my eyes, but continue.
I thought he could have been 38. So it's kind of funny because I don't see him holding on to it for long because the murderer's row that he has to go through to defend it. There's not an easy fight in the top 5 for him. There's not an easy fight in the top 6 for him, actually. Most likely, unless something terrible happens, the winner of Santos versus Glover is fighting again. Now, either it's a rematch between Thiago Santos, who knocked him out, or it's Glover Teixeira, who has fully defied Father Time, is even older than Jan Blachowicz, and who the heck knows, in this era, Glover Teixeira is the champion. I wouldn't be surprised. But the realest dark horse is Yuri Prochazka in the division for me, because that guy is just a crazy knockout away from, hey guys, welcome to the UFC. I'm here. What he did to Volkan Ozdemir is something that no one had done to Volkan Ozdemir. Like, DC took him down and beat him up and finished him with strikes, but Yuri just gunslinger, one-on-one, toe-to-toe, and they brawled, and it was a mess. And Yuri got hit a lot, which is a bad thing, by the way, for heavy strikers like Thiago Santos and Jan Blachowicz. But there's too many tough guys. I don't see any. I look at the list of guys here on this list of the top 6 people on the list, and I don't see anybody that could be the champion and could absolutely hold it for more than a defense or two at most. And that is so exciting to me. I love parity in top divisions. I enjoy the prospect of, can somebody do it? Because we were just talking about Adesanya, who's next for him, who can beat this guy. We look at Jan Blachowicz. We might have to say who can beat this guy because what he did to Dominic Reyes. But there's a lot of guys who seem to be able to beat this, that can beat this guy. And that's fascinating to me. So I'm on board this mayhem, this 205-pound train, unless Jon Jones comes back and ruins the party. And then, well.
So what you're saying is Nemkov beats them all?
Yes, probably. by arm triangle or something exciting like that.
There you go.
I'm very excited now to see sort of this fresh coat of paint on the light heavyweight division. It really adds a bit more than we had before. Now, as much as we appreciate a dominant champion like Jon Jones, it is good to see this battle at the top. Remember, before Jon Jones, the light heavyweight division was considered the premier division in the UFC, and you had the belt being passed back and forth between Rampage to Forrest Griffin to Rashad Evans to Lyoto to Shogun. I mean, just those names right there. You're talking about all-time greats just passing the belt back and forth to one another over an extended period of time. And while the names that we have at light heavyweight don't hold up to the prestige of Rashad or Rampage and whatnot, there's still some very good guys. And without that boogeyman at the top of the division, it opens up more possibilities. Something that I brought up on Fight Night on the Body Lock post-fight show. Volkan Ozdemir and Nikita Krylov has a little more weight to it now. And that's a fight that otherwise would be completely useless in all intents and purposes as far as the title picture was concerned. But now without that boogeyman that's at the top of the division, a fight like that between two guys coming off of losses and, have struggles throughout their careers once they hit the upper echelon, it means a little more now. It means a little more now to see Thiago Santos, who had enough to earn one Georgia scorecard against Jones, now that he's there without that boogeyman in front of him. There is so much more added to this division. And when Anthony Smith gets another win, the talk's going to start all about him again too. So there's so many things that can happen at 205 that are more exciting now. And it's exactly because there will not be a Blachowicz era, in my opinion. It will be the era of the light heavyweights as a whole. So should be exciting to see what happens from here on out. But let's move on. We're going to test out a new segment here because while I am someone who 99% of the time gets things right and dials in exactly to what you people are thinking, but aren't got enough courage to say, we got to have this segment right there for the rest of the gentlemen who are continually wrong and ruining the quality of the Walkout Network. This segment is called Eating Crow. This is where we get to admit something that we were wrong about in the lead up to a fight. And now here we are to season our crow and take a bite. So let's start with Jay. What's your Eating Crow moment this week?
So it's a little lower stakes than some of the rest of them, but what I had felt coming into UFC 253 was one of the locks. And it wasn't a lock because the guy I was picking was a good fighter per se, but because the guy he was facing was not only had previously faced very questionable talent, had a record that was kind of seemingly fabricated and built up, but also the fact that, he hadn't fought in, I think it was 2 years, and for all intents and purposes probably got into the UFC because he knew a guy like his head coach, Damian Maia. I had Khadis Ibragimov, the light heavyweight, winning the fight against Danilo Marques. I had him winning by first round knockout, and that was dumb. And the reason why is because I had Ibragimov winning. First of all, I had him winning by knockout, which isn't something that Ibragimov traditionally does, but has done before, more recently in his performances. But because he was 0-3 in the UFC and none of his losses he was ever really in the fight. You could argue against Roman Dolidze in his most recent bout in July. It was kind of one of those back and forth slobber knocker messy fights where he got very tired in about 2 minutes. The fight ended in 4 minutes, and he was already gassed out, and that kind of led to that. But my thought was this unknown Brazilian kind of grappler guy that we know nothing about, and I could barely find much tape on him outside of his fight in LFA, which he lost. It didn't seem promising, and yet for 3 dreadful rounds, Marques imposed his will. I don't know. I'm not sure how to really say it because nobody won that fight. It was one of those. Okay, with all due respect to both fighters, this was not a UFC fight. And that hurt on top of the fact that I was completely off in my prediction. And it was just, oh man, a fight that we shouldn't even be watching. I can't even call like a Babe Ruth called shot. And that stung my pride a little bit. So I'm eating that crow.
I've seen higher quality sparring matches in some gyms that aren't exactly high quality. So Jason, please share with us your eating crow moment this week.
Yeah, so I don't know why, but I just kind of thought Fabian Edwards would walk through Van Steenis. I think it's just because I just have that much faith in the Edwards family. I don't know what it is, but really, in reality, I thought he was winning that fight by the time it was over. It's one of these things where I guess if I'm surprised by anything, not even just the loss and just my prediction that Bellator still has not instituted 5-round main events. If that was a 5-round fight, I have Fabian Edwards taking over quite handily in that 3rd round. The 2nd round was way, way, way more in Van Steenis' favor. So, I think I really thoroughly thought that he would win that fight. And it just started slow. It was almost too respectful in the 1st round. And I think that's what really lost it for him because that was the closest round. The 2nd one was far more dominant for Van Steenis. So, I'll eat crow on making that prediction so boldly, even so much as to put it in the live chat on YouTube, like while they're doing the Bellator live stream. Look like an idiot. There we go.
Bellator can't have 5-round main events and then still give us all those post-limbs. So there's a method to the madness. Ben, what is your eating crow moment this week?
Going into UFC 253 this weekend, I was firmly in the camp that had Aleksa Camur beating William Knight. And William Knight was not an unknown quantity to me. In fact, I'd seen most of his fights. I'd seen both of his Contender Series fights, obviously. I'd seen a couple of his CES fights. I'd seen his one career loss in CFFC. But he was an unknown enough quantity that I said, okay, if you're going to give me this guy that looks like a mad scientist made him out of a stack of bowling balls, and he's just got muscles on top of his muscles, he's never been, to the final bell of a 3-round fight, and he just he really does just work off of explosion. He's going to gas out and he's going to lose to the more seasoned fighter. I'm going to pick that every time. It's the Carwin rule. If the guy's the size of a house, and you don't have much, deep water experience with him, pick him to lose the fight against the more seasoned fighter. I was dead wrong. Not only did he beat Camur pretty convincingly, he was the fresher man in the 3rd round. I do not know if this, generously listed 5'10" light heavyweight has a high ceiling, no pun intended, in the light heavyweight division, but he is going to be a whole hell of a lot of fun for as long as it lasts. So my apologies to William the Nightmare Knight, you crazy tanked up man who made your pro debut when you were over 30 years old and are already in the UFC. I can't wait to see your next fight.
Yeah, that was William Knight definitely gave us something memorable. 5 seconds away from ripping that guy's arm off. That was terrifying.
That was the most legitimately freaked out, visceral reaction from the UFC booth that I can remember in a while. They were close to jumping up and screaming, "Stop the fight" or something.
Yeah,
if something doesn't stop, we're going to see bone just splintering out of a wound. It was not,
because how often do you see "Oops, Americana"? It just doesn't materialize the way it did, and just boom. That was a holy smokes.
He's gonna hurt a lot of people in his career. All right. So my eating crow moment comes courtesy of Tukhugov and Hakeem Dawodu. I thought Dawodu was going to absolutely wipe the floor with Tukhugov. I thought maybe this makes it to halfway through the second round tops. I thought Dawodu was just going to come out there, explode with a power punch combination, and just put the lights out. Ended up being a much closer fight than that. A highly technical affair. I actually scored it for Tukhugov. I understand the scores for Dawodu. It was that close, and more so about what you value in the scoring system. But my eating crow, guess I got to give the apologies to Tukhugov, who put forth an excellent performance there and narrowly missed another W on his record. All right, so let's go.
Can I throw in something real quick?
So
this is a very unusual situation that happened, completely independent and isolated, and there was no knowledge or back and forth about this. The three Sherdog play-by-play scorers, myself, senior or editor, features editor Brian Knapp, and news editor Tristan Critchfield, we've all been doing this for a few minutes. All three of us scored the first round for Dawodu Tukhugov 10-10, independent of one another. It was then, which was a very surprising thing to all the scores all pop up from us at the same time, record it like that. I believe we were the only ones that scored it like that. So I think we actually, all three of us scored the fight a draw, 29-29. So that says how close it was in our eyes.
I saw that tweet and just thought, wondering if it was a typo. But at the same time, I was debating whether or not to give that a 10-10 score. I gave that first round to Tukhugov simply because he was moving forward more, and I thought he landed a couple of shots a little bit cleaner. But what a lot of times too, it shows why 10-10 rounds are something that probably should be used more. If you're trying to score a round and you're taking the most minute of detail and giving that a 10-9, maybe it should be a 10-10 because that minute detail shouldn't compare to like a clear 10-9 round. So if anything, it shows more flaws in the scoring system in mixed martial arts than anything wrong with the judges per se. So I understand the scorecards kind of being all over the place. And I think there was also a 30-27 in there for Dawodu.
Let me pull it up real quick.
I think so.
Yes, there was.
Yeah, and like that's one of the rare times where I wasn't upset about such a wayward scorecard because they were all close rounds and you all could see them for Dawodu if you were so inclined. So there it is. But
and that was the other, and that was the fight that had the where Dawodu at the end was cursing him out, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, it's like a motorcycle convention outside my house.
Hey.
But anyway, all right. So now moving on to some of the aftermath from UFC 253. So there was a little bit of gyration going on Israel Adesanya's part on at the expense of his opponent Paulo Costa. We saw a little bit of extracurricular activities there as well, like you saw, like where you mentioned with Dawodu cursing people out and whatnot. And there was a warning from I can't remember what fight it was. There was a warning from a ref about cursing during the bout. So
the Dawodu fight.
That was that fight. Okay.
Yeah.
So, fellas, are we? What are we doing here? Should we be limiting this sort of language, I guess, in the cage or in post-fight conduct? Should fighters start getting admonished for this sort of behavior?
I mean, if they want to clamp down on language, considering some of these things are, just going out on cable or whatever, I guess they can. Ultimately, I don't have to think it's classy. I don't have to think people are gracious winners or losers to be able to enjoy this sport and root for, particular individuals or it would be ridiculous of me to watch the sport I watch that attracts a disproportionate number of misfits, miscreants, people from all kinds of spotty, like personal backgrounds and criminal backgrounds, and expect them to be, like well-groomed family men and women that all act like Stephen Thompson. That's just not it. And I don't need that to be the case. There are lines that they shouldn't step over, like I'm glad that we never had a season of Tough around Adesanya and Romero, because we would have just had so many just broken English homophobic slurs, like not well bleeped out, that I wouldn't have been able to watch it. You know, like as long as certain lines aren't crossed, these guys don't have to be friends afterwards. You know, if they want to be shitty to each other, that's fine. I mean, are we going to turn into the NFL where, I'm thinking of like the Key and Peele skit where, the ref's getting ready to blow the whistle if he does like one more like, pump of his hips. Like, do we need someone like hovering over Adesanya as he was like humping Costa to like ready to throw the flag? I don't know. I'm the oldest guy on this panel. I'm the one who part of me is standing there with my hands on my hips, like, telling these kids to get off my lawn. This Adesanya generation of fighters that talk trash more like gamers than fighters. And even I am like, let them be shitty sportsmen to each other. I don't care. Really, everything that happens after the ref pulls them apart or the final horn sounds is extracurricular. I can turn my TV off at that point if I really want to.
All right.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel kind of back and forth on the issues that happen, because I mean, honestly, there's part of them is severity, like Hakeem doing his mean Hakeem thing. I mean, his thing is mean mugging the guy, and he was effing fight me. Come on, what are you waiting for? Come on, kill me, do it now. He was doing all that, yelling at him, and Tukhugov was not really biting on it. He wasn't taking offense or anything like that. And the referee said, "Hey, stop cussing." And I burst out laughing because they're in a fist fight. Hey, don't you say bad words, but you can punch each other in the mouth and knee each other in the jaw and do all kinds of other horrible things. So the fight's a fight. I mean, if they're letting the Diaz brothers through, and actually, when Donald Cerrone fought Diaz, the middle fingers going and everything like that, let the fight be the fight, and then that window kind of should end. And then I think that there maybe should be some sort of another standard when it comes to conduct afterwards. Like, I don't think that we should throw the flags on excessive celebration, like jumping on the cage. That's a thing that New York Commission actually does fine fighters for and suspend them for a couple days. It's either 15 or I think it's 15 days for jumping on the cage after they win a fight to celebrate. They get fined and suspended just for automatic. It's an automatic thing. They get docked and banged. I don't like that, because I can't think of, I've watched a couple fights here and there in my days, and I can't think of many of them that have fallen off the cage. I think if anything, they're more concerned that the fighters will leave the cage to go do something and smack somebody. Okay, deal with it that way. I mean, that can be handled that differently. But then there are some other things like spitting on your corner and like the Bisping Jorge Rivera situation that happened. To me, that's a little tough. The Adesanya, when he went over and he did the hump thing to Costa, I didn't like that. It was like, I mean, Duffy, you nailed it. It was like the gamer kind of, what are they? Crap. Teabagging thing to go, hi, I beat you, I got you. And it just didn't feel right. It just like, what? Come on. We have enough to deal with. Do we really need this to go with? And then when he went over to Eric Albarracin and did some explicit gestures to finish the sequence that he was going for, I didn't feel good about it. And that's really too bad, because I think about this in post-fight celebrations and crazy things that happen when a fighter wins and does something stupid at the end of it. It takes all the victory out of it, whether it's to celebrate like an idiot, like Johnny Walker doing the worm and blowing his shoulder out, or jumping on the cage, doing a backflip and blowing your leg out. So whatever that stupid thing that you might do to celebrate. Come on, guys. I understand. I personally, as nothing more than a guy who did, amateur, not even karate tournaments when he was a kid, I don't understand the thrill and the agony and all of that. But, at the end of the day, you are on live television, and you're being paid and sponsored and all this kind of stuff. And, I sound like the old man in the room. There are kids watching, man. So I don't know. I didn't feel good. And I think that's weird, because I shouldn't have any issue with that, because they're fighting each other. But then, you take it to the next step, and it just, I don't know. It wasn't for me.
So, Jason, I know I do remember seeing a tweet that you had about Adesanya in particular. So I have a feeling that we might butt heads just slightly on this one, and I'm all for it. So Jason, I think that the Adesanya celebration in isolation, classless, not something that we want to see in sports and whatnot. But beyond the fact that they're fist fighting each other, and that's kind of what it all boils down to. I don't have a problem with what Adesanya did, simply because this was karmic justice in a lot of ways, in my opinion. Costa, throughout the entire build up to this fight, even before this fight was officially signed, most of his trash talk toward Izzy was deeply homophobic, deeply transphobic. It was all sorts of things about challenging manhood and having this prowess over him and whatnot. And then for Izzy to symbolically take that away after he took it away in a fist fight just seemed appropriate to me. It just seemed like a perfect way to end this so-called rivalry. So Jason, please, your retort, my man.
Yeah. So we just had an eating crow segment. I feel like I'm kind of up for one on that. I've softened my stance on it because, I initially made a post where I called it sexual assault, because, I went off a literal definition that, called it unwanted sexual contact, which, if you do look up Webster's dictionary, that is what comes up for it. But somebody commented on it who'd actually been a sexual assault survivor. And they were like, you know what, this actually makes me kind of uncomfortable. And I don't want to reveal who their name is or anything like that, just because even though they commented on there, I don't want to put their business out there.
It was Luke Rockhold.
Was that?
It was Luke Rockhold.
Rockhold, he's so
like after the Romero fight.
Jesus. Whenever something like that happens, it kind of instantly puts something in context when somebody who's actually lived an experience like that says something like that to you. And it was in the kindest way possible. They weren't being a jerk about it. They were just straight up drawing attention to the fact, well, I've actually survived this, and I wouldn't consider that sexual assault. And we had a kind of a deeper conversation about it. So I would definitely say I went way too hard in on that. And it's definitely like one of those things where it was one of those kind of red-faced moments. I felt instantly embarrassed, and I felt stupid, and I felt small. Like I felt very, very silly in that moment. So I think I definitely went too hard. I do still believe, so I'll say this, if there's anybody whose speech that I feel like needs to be censored or anything like that, I think it's Colby Covington calling out a dead coach and Glenn Robinson and saying that he was going to be laughing from his grave at Usman. And then he said some other things after that, like it literally had just happened last week, some things that I would consider blatantly racist. I don't think there's any room for that sort of thing. So if anybody has said anything in talking, I don't think that Adesanya is the one to have done the speaking. And actually, I don't have a problem with that. Last year when Ben Askren got defeated by Jorge Masvidal, I was actually completely on his side because it was like, you know what? I actually didn't mind Ben Askren's antics so much as I do somebody like Colby Covington, but he was bringing it into this pro wrestling realm. And Masvidal was saying, this isn't pro wrestling. And I'm going to make you eat those words right here in front of everybody. I'm going to make fun of the way that you fell out. I didn't have a problem with that. But I do still see what happened there as I guess the wording and the phrasing that I would use for it now is just inappropriate. That's probably the best wording that I could use for it is, yes, they are fighting, but they do sign a contract for that. Yes, they are talking shit, but they also do kind of sign a contract for that when they say they're going to do press conferences. They're going to jump on these media calls. They had 2 million views on a pre-fight blow up on an ESPN call that just went crazy, I think that stuff is pretty much signed up for, it's called for. And let's take the moment to call out Paulo Costa. He should not have said those things. They're deplorable and they have no place in this sport, straight up, unequivocally. But on the same token, I do take it, seriously when somebody does something sexually that's unwanted. And I get the irony and I totally get the point of it. But for me, I just don't want to see that, And where do we draw the line with it too? Like what if Colby tries to do that in his next fight and then he says, well, Izzy did it. I don't think he would have as nearly a defensible position as Izzy. I'll say that straight up. I think no matter what, if Colby were to do that, I couldn't see a possible plausible area of justification there other than him just kind of being a shithead. And believe me, I've made so much content about Colby. I know I'm ranting here, but I've clearly got a lot of thoughts on it. But so I would say I definitely eat crow in the fact that I went way too hard on it. That was a very serious, thing for me to have said, and I should not have said it. It was really dumb. So I'll just leave it more in kind of a generalized area where I guess I'm just not cool with it. It is sexual in nature. I mean, you are humping a guy's back. And I don't want to see women doing that. I'm a straight guy, so it has nothing to do with homophobia or anything like that. I don't care who's doing it, to who's doing it. I don't care if I'm attracted to what's happening or I'm not attracted to what's happening. I just think sexual is a consensual thing, no matter which line you go down. And so that's my very, very long-winded answer. So there we go.
I would just like to point out that you said the word sexual and then you said go down. So just want to throw that out there as a little bit of phrasing. But anyway, I think you bring some good points there. I think it's also too important to make a distinction between the different types of talk. And Jason, you did touch on this, but I think it's very important that I reemphasize this simply because the very emotional show that we had last week in relation to Colby Covington's behavior, I think the line for me, and sounds like this is the line for you as well, the line for me is drawn at hate speech. If you are saying something that can be considered hate speech, if you're saying something racist or homophobic, you're speaking out against someone's religion, like McGregor did at 229. If you are crossing those lines, that's when I have a problem. If it's between personal trash talk, like just two men or two women talking mean words to one another, I really couldn't care less. So that's kind of where the line is drawn for me. All right, so now let's move on to the greatest titled segment in all of media history. I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons, and this is where we share something throughout the past week in combat sports that surprised us or unironically did not. So, Ben, I'll start with you. What is your I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons moment this week?
Well, we've already talked about him a little bit on this show, but a week ago, on this very same show, we had a brief Who You Got segment about UFC 253, and I was asked for my take on the Reyes versus Blachowicz fight, and I said, I think Jan Blachowicz has got this one, and I think he'll make it look pretty easy. Now, I'm not here to congratulate myself because I did chicken out and flip my pick in time for the Sherdog staff pick'em, that was finalized last Friday. So I chickened out, but everybody chickened out. All 16 individual pickers and all 10 or 11 forum moderators that make up like a composite picker all went for Blachowicz. I don't know
all
when
we're going to...
Sorry, all went for Reyes. Sorry. Yeah, unanimously went for Reyes. I don't know when we're going to stop sleeping on this man. In 2017, when we saw him lose a miserable decision to Patrick Cummins to go 2-4 in the UFC and quite possibly have his job on the line, people get quiet Europeans get cut from the UFC for less than going 2-4. I don't think anybody looked into that cage and thought they were seeing a future light heavyweight champion, either guy, but certainly not Blachowicz. Since then, the guy's gone 8-1. His track record since then is pretty well documented since, it's been thrown up on screens for the past couple of weeks. In those 9 fights, he has been the betting underdog 8 times. Vegas has never caught up with this guy. We have never caught up with this guy. And to listen to the panel talk, and I'm not disrespecting anybody here, but it sounds like whoever he's fighting next, he'll probably be the underdog again.
Yep.
If Jon Jones comes back, Blachowicz will probably be a substantial underdog to him. And at this point, why should he give a solitary shit about that? This man he's undergone a late career just transformation in a way that very, very few fighters in high-level mixed martial arts history ever have. He's a young 37. His record is deceptive because a lot of what he brought from KSW were one-night tournaments where he was fighting 2-round fights against, frankly, some badly overmatched people. He does not have as much tread off the tires as you would expect a 37-year-old man with 35 fights to have. You know, I made kind of like a little joshing, hey, you know, I think we're going to have at least a 6-month Jan Blachowicz era. I don't know how long he's going to reign, but I know I am done picking against him. I don't care who he is fighting next or what the odds are. I've got Jan Blachowicz next. I will not be surprised again, motherfuckers.
Thank you. You misspelled Mr. Falcons. Jay, what is your I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment this
So
week?
we're going to leave the UFC for a few minutes and go over to Europe, because over in Italy, that Bellator had a card, and it had its first European return. No fans, no media allowed either. We have a local guy who works with us, and he was not allowed to cover the event in Italy. So that was kind of surprising. So when Bellator puts on these European series packages, they tend to put on prospects that are fairly mismatched, and we have a lot of lopsided results, and it can be kind of comical, and it's fun to watch. It's good to have on like a second screen. It's a Bellator Euro series, so there's no I don't want to say no legitimacy, but it's Bellator's second and third strings. Like, Bellator pulled in Chris Hoekstra, the KSW commentator, because they wouldn't put any of their normal guys to do it, which was very surprising. No Big John and Josh Thompson squabbling and fussing at each other. So this card, I had the expectation: sloppy, messy, regional talent, gaudy records, crazy, silly knockouts and submissions, and it did not deliver. Didn't deliver. Did not give me the kind of thing that I would think I have come to expect on a Bellator Euro package. And that was shocking to me. There was a head kick knockout. Sure, there were a couple of TKOs, but there was nothing of merit and the kind of thing you can really take home and go, wow, I learned something today. Like the Fabian Edwards fight, as Hartley mentioned earlier, was a very close fight, who I think I might have also seen Edwards winning, and I also wish it should have been a 5-round fight. But Bellator refuses, and the night ended with 6 consecutive decisions, none of which were of any significance. And it's kind of difficult because Bellator is hard to watch normally. Like, if you want to watch it in the UK, you have a totally different situation from somebody in Ireland, France, Italy, Germany, everybody. It is a mess. It is a geo-blocked, huge mess. You can't just flip on YouTube or so-and-so app to do it. So luckily in the States, we're able to just throw in the YouTube now. But after this card, I think Bellator, and I am very sorry, Tuttle and Shao and all the rest of you who I speak to on a fairly regular basis, Bellator, you guys are becoming skippable. The events are becoming kind of completely lackluster. Since the return, I would argue there has not been a standout event. And there have been, 6 fight cards with a couple belts on the line and a couple interesting things. Like the Nemkov fight was good, and Michael Chandler knocking out Benson Henderson was interesting. But that's over the course of several hours of several things like that. It is losing its luster as the number 2 promotion. And I don't know if there's anybody to fill the void, but just by the way it has been run and match made lately, it's losing its magic for me. And I think that's why I'm so surprised about it. Because Bellator has we joke, Kaposa and some others of us on Twitter, we have a little picture of an old native sacrifice of somebody getting their heart carved out and held to the sun, and it says Bellator in the logo. So for like the Bellator prelims, it's crazy, they're going to be mayhem. And they haven't been. And Bellator hasn't delivered, and I am really surprised by that.
All right. Jason, what's your I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment this week?
Yeah, so there was an interview that Justin Gaethje did with Brett Okamoto over on ESPN last week. And the thing that really surprised me is, I think it was the first time I'd at least heard somebody point blank ask him what he was going to do once he got to the ground. And being a D1 wrestler, I do know, that kind of classic folly. Yes, they're used to being the hammer, not the nail. And so, you have the classic instances like Randy Couture versus Kevin Randleman, where once the tides turned, it never really fixed itself. They could never really right the ship. And that's happened time and time and time again. Randy Couture with Vincent Anyway, for instance. But so when you look at what he was saying, he was basically saying, yeah, my takedown defense means I'm just not going to go to the ground. If it does, I'm in really big trouble. He just outright said it. And I'm just like, I actually have him as a favorite to win, in my opinion. I know that's the underdog pick. I know most people are picking Khabib, but I'm saying, you know what? If this guy can keep it on the feet, which no one has really been able to take him down for more than a couple of seconds. He's a D1 wrestler. When have we seen a Khabib up against a really strong wrestler? He's got some questions to answer. And let's not forget the Gleason T-bow, steroids and all. That did happen. 3 rounds, no takedowns. It can happen, and it has happened, albeit it's been 8 years. Maybe it can't anymore. But I was just really shocked to hear him say something so honest in that moment. And to be honest, it's made me waver on picking him. I'm like, oh, wow. I thought he was at least going to drill that really hard, at least plan for it. And it sounds like he's just not planning for being on his back at all, which is horrible game planning. For somebody like Trevor Whitman to be a part of that camp, I'm really surprised. Or maybe he's just, playing a bit of a poker face and saying, take me down. I've actually got a game plan for it, but I doubt that. I really doubt that.
All right, not a bad one there. So I'm not surprised Mr. Falcon's moment comes courtesy of one of our favorite topics of discussion here on the Walkout Network, and that is one Joshua Fabia, who decided with cameras rolling that it was a good idea to run up on Matt Serra. Wow. The school of self-awareness, yet you're not that aware. I don't even know how you weren't even fighting and you took the biggest L this weekend. So good Lord. But anyway,
I mean, that just needs to be a meme that starts with nobody : and then that entire conversation is like the response. Like, why would you even do
what did you hope to accomplish right there?
I didn't see the video, so can you give me a synopsis of what happened? What did they say?
So this was filmed on Looking for a Fight. Dean Thomas and Matt Serra are sitting down having breakfast at whatever hotel that they're at in Abu Dhabi.
It was officially filmed.
It looked like it was filmed from a cell phone or something, okay. And then it was like sat on the table, so they just spliced it into the show. But Fabia runs up on Serra and he's like, I heard you were talking about me and you just won't say my name. And Serra's like, I don't know your fucking name. And it's like, I respect Diego, but I think what you do is silly. And pretty much, and Fabia really had nothing to do but to walk away with his tail tucked. But yeah,
it went on awkwardly long. Like Fabia kept trying to bring up argument points, and Serra kind of went back and forth between refuting his points and still insisting that he didn't know who the fuck he was.
So Josh Fabia walked up on Matt Serra and said, do you know who I am? Like that kind of thing?
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. So I think, but in conclusion, I will say that had Matt Serra been holding a knife, maybe Fabia would have got the better of him. So we'll see if this fight gets booked. But anyway, speaking of Josh Fabia, who is the I guess not the chief cornerman anymore since Stephan Bonner was there Saturday, but he is in the corner of one Diego Sanchez, who strangely enough was the subject of potential super fight talk in the Instagram DMs of all places. Conor McGregor leaked some DMs between himself and Dana White about upcoming fights, and Diego Sanchez's name came up, and Conor was pushing for a bout with him for a card in LA pre-pandemic. He wanted this to happen sometime early summer. I don't know what to think about this, but there's also these rumors and I guess somewhat validated reports, and even Pacquiao has said something about this, that he's supposed to be boxing Conor McGregor either at the end of 2020 or early 2021. I don't know what to make of this, fellas. What do you make of this Conor McGregor trifecta between Diego Sanchez, Manny Pacquiao? Or maybe it's a square: Diego Sanchez, Manny Pacquiao, and Dana White's Instagram DMs. Gentlemen, what's going on here?
How? Okay, first of all, and this is very hyper cynical. No one's talking about me. No, they're talking about Fight Island. They're talking about all these other cool fights. Wah, you're not talking about me. I'm going to say something crazy that I said months ago. It feels like purely for attention, because it's making me, it's choking me up here because of all the nonsense that I'm having to think about right now. I mean, who puts themselves in the headlines by leaking messages about the dumbest things that you could say? How can Conor McGregor look good by saying, I want to fight Diego Sanchez? And I'm assuming this was after Diego Sanchez won his thrilling fight of the year over Michel Pereira in February. And Sanchez was the victor, the obvious clear favorite, and did everything he could to win and not get kneed in the fight and win by disqualification. So there's no when Conor wants to have a fight, he wants to be the upside, but he wants to have somebody that can kind of almost keep up there, so it isn't just a little silly match. Like Cerrone had a name value. Whether Cerrone was on a long win streak or not, he had a name value to bring into it. Floyd Mayweather had been retired, but hey, that's a crazy name value, and McGregor was actually the B-side in that match. Diego Sanchez doesn't have the name like Cerrone has, and there's nobody clamoring to buy a pay-per-view fight of Diego Sanchez, hyper super awareness 2.0 Diego Sanchez, like almost transitioning back to being called the Dream Diego Sanchez, to fight against Conor McGregor. How? And then on top of that, you seriously want to fight Manny Pacquiao? Okay, let's say that you can put this together. Did you see last year when he fought Keith Thurman, undefeated, pound for pound Keith Thurman, and dropped him in the first round and then smashed him up in the 10th round and very, very closely got the stoppage? You think you're going to be able to hang and do better than Thurman did? Dude, do you need that much attention? Seriously? How? Like, if this fight happens, Floyd Mayweather has historically been a guy who plays with his food. He's going to style on you. He's going to beat you over 12 rounds. I mean, you can think of the knockouts he's had in the last 10 years, one of which was Victor Ortiz, who, there was kind of some nonsense going on there. The other was Ricky Hatton, I think, in the 10th. So Floyd Mayweather knocked out Conor McGregor. Manny Pacquiao don't play. Like, he's 40 and he's a senator and he's doing stuff, but this is not super inactive. This is just, there is no, I don't get it. Like, okay, I too would go in there and box Manny Pacquiao and get smoked and make $50 million. Okay, cool. But how many more cash grabs do we need? I am so beyond over it that I'm choking up over it.
Like this is absolutely just farcical beyond our wildest dreams. I mean, I don't even giving the Diego Sanchez Conor fight any attention is just asinine. We're just throwing that away. The Pacquiao thing seems like it might actually happen. Let's also keep in mind that they are now under the same management company. As of, I think, 6 months ago or something like that, that move was made. So this is something that's been talked about for quite some time. This was considered a move toward that when he signed with Paradigm. But we're not talking about Floyd Mayweather here. We're not talking about a guy who is all about gambling, and he will bet on himself to win in a certain round and play with his opponent until it gets to that round if he feels like it. And Manny Pacquiao don't give a fuck about none of that. This is a guy who will knock your head clean off and smile at you as soon as it's over with. So beyond the Keith Thurman fight, which was a fantastic performance on his part, he also sent Adrian Bronner in a complete defensive shell in the not too distant past. I don't.
He beat the brakes off of Lucas Matisse.
Yes,
Matisse.
Absolutely. So like, I'm not getting what. There's a difference between being confident as a fighter, and every fighter needs to be confident, and then there's stupidity. then there's just wanton stupidity, and this is on that line. Like, if this fight happens, that's the day Conor McGregor dies, and I don't mean that as a joke. I don't mean that as a euphemism. Conor McGregor could very well possibly die in the ring.
Is there any indication that McGregor is a better boxer or in better physical condition than he was at the time of the Mayweather fight? No. If anything, he's going to be degraded in all of those regards. It is not even an open secret, but just an open public thing that the guy really hasn't been in the gym. Not even Josh Fabia would call like pulling out your dick on Corsica any kind of training regimen. So yeah, like death. Like why would you even? And the Sanchez thing is disappointing if it like is true to the point of being more than just like a single spitball DM. Because the one thing you could always say for McGregor on the MMA side was that he didn't shy away from a challenge. He didn't duck anything. Like, he always wanted to be great on top of being rich and famous, wanted to fight the toughest guys. And if he was the one bringing up Diego Sanchez fight, even, before this most recent Sanchez performance, that is disappointing.
There's something I want to point out here, and this is kind of like a backup stat of the week. So Manny Pacquiao has had 71 professional boxing matches. Conor McGregor is 0-1 in boxing. Discard the MMA stuff because Conor can't kick Manny in the head. Conor McGregor will be Manny Pacquiao's least experienced boxing opponent ever. And Manny Pacquiao fought some not great guys. And Conor McGregor in Manny Pacquiao's 72nd pro boxing match will fight an 0-1 guy who just got knocked out by Floyd Mayweather. How in 2020, why did we do something unnecessarily cruel to puppies in our last lives to make this year so ridiculously bad? I just don't get it. I don't get it.
I guess I'll kind of go a different route. I guess my short answer is I just really, really, really I deeply don't care about him fighting either of those guys. It's just so dumb. But the one thing that I did like about it, so obviously we got two controversial figures, and it's almost like, I don't know, if you're playing like The Last of Us and you get the bad guys, the bad humans actually going up against the, what do they call them? The clickers, or, the different types of zombies they have. Horrible analogy. That's a horrible start. Anyhow, like, it is one of those kind of things where you almost have like the two bad guys facing each other. Because the one thing I did like about it is when it showed his own text messages, I love that Dana White was like, I need my promoter's license revoked if I try to put on you versus Diego Sanchez. That was fucking great. And then also to have the quip back, because Dana was complaining. He was like, dude, these were private messages. It's kind of like you broke like a rule of trust. And he's like, Conor McGregor kind of kicks back. And he's like, well, you were telling everybody I wasn't trying to fight anybody, that I didn't want to fight. Yet here I am literally in a text message proving that I was actually trying to fight Gaethje. So it's kind of almost like the bad guys fighting each other in some ways. It's very enjoyable to kind of see like, oh, there's a nice dig at Conor there. Oh, there's a nice dig at Dana, and they're just kind of exposing each other. So I kind of enjoyed it from the very chaotic sense that they both kind of got put in their place in their own respective ways.
Definitely a lot of unintentional comedy throughout this whole ordeal, and hopefully we don't have anything else to report on it later on. So let's just hope this one dies on this episode. But all right, now it's time for me to flex my authority on you mofos by way of the speed bag, and this is where we are going to time all of your answers. You gentlemen will have 10 seconds. We'll answer this in a round robin. Jason, I'm going to start with you. Will Jon Jones come back to light heavyweight and try to take Jan Blachowicz's belt? 10 seconds.
Only if Stipe and Ngannou are up next and he's just bored, he'll actually want to come down and take it. Otherwise, it'll be a long time, so probably not.
Okay, Ben.
I think it's quite possible, but Blachowicz would have to still have the belt a year from now. It's not going to be his next fight.
All right. And Jay.
I don't know. I know Jones. I think he's going to try and go back and become the center of attention again. I think the heavyweight thing's not going to pan out, and I think he's going to go fight Jan.
All right. Okay, so next question. I'll start with you on this one, Ben. Would you have made Robbie Lawler versus Mike Perry now?
No.
Jay.
I would have rather had Robbie Lawler fight Diego Sanchez. Like, at this point, no, Mike Perry needs to actually go through rehab and anger management and all that stuff. He needs to do that.
Jason.
Today's environment and the kind of stuff that we've got going on right now, Mike Perry clearly is one of the people that needs help more than anybody else. Hung Yu Lim, when he first started, he's still got problems.
All right. So now, last question. I'll start with you on this one, Jay. Be honest, where were you of Rizin's event this past weekend?
It's going to sound messed up, but I almost didn't remember it was going to happen. They're charging $50 a pop, so I've kind of written it off my schedule.
Jason.
Totally forgot about it. I wasn't aware on the night, filthy casual. Yeah, I forgot about it. No, I wasn't aware of it. Ben.
I was aware just because I get emails from Rizin that I have to click the translate thing on, and then I was hanging on the Asakura fight just in case it affected our rankings, but I didn't watch.
Oh wow! Look at that, elitist Ben with his take there. All right, so now
I didn't watch it.
Yeah, none of us watched it.
I'm still a filthy casual.
We heard you, hipster. We heard you.
They actually have the audacity to make people pay $50 a pop to watch those shows now.
And if it were 15, I'd do it.
Yes,
but I'm too proud to steal it, and I'm too cheap to buy it. So fuck it.
Yeah,
and I'm not going to expense it. Hell no, that's way too much money for a Rizin card.
That's way too much money for Crave. All right, so let's go ahead and add 30 seconds to the clock, and now I will answer all the questions in succession, and I will start the clock after reading the first question. So, will Jon Jones come back to the light heavyweight division to try to take Blachowicz' belt? No, I think this is more smoke and mirrors. He teased going to heavyweight with no real intent for years, and I think he's going to do that with light heavyweight for the foreseeable future. Would I have made Robbie Lawler versus Mike Perry now? No, I would have leaked DM text messages about Mike Perry versus Conor McGregor. And would I watch I would have watched the Rising card if I knew about it. I just didn't know until I saw tweets about it, and by then I was too late. I was too tired. I went to sleep. And yeah, that's that. So
there was a pretty sick soccer kick knockout. I will say that.
So I'll go back and watch some of it. I just watched Karate Combat over the weekend. That was that was an excellent event. But that ending.
Besides the ending, yeah.
Do we know?
Yes, yeah. I talked to Karate Combat. Jerome Brown's okay. What happened is actually this happened before. I thought it was Sajara Eubanks or maybe Sarah Morris, one of the fighters that cut weight so badly that her kidneys started to break down muscle and stuff. So it just fell apart and collapsed. There's their name for a rhomboid
rhabdomyolysis.
Thank you. That's what happened. And he's okay. Actually, he will be fighting later this season. So I guess he's recovered enough. But that was terrifying.
I guess JDS had that same condition for one of the Kane fights. Yeah, that scared the hell out of me. That was terrifying. Yeah. So glad he's okay. Yeah. But that was an excellent card they put on. The one flaw with it, and I love Marshawn Lynch as a personality, as a football player, and everything. Marshawn Lynch represents a lot of good things to me. However, no, get him off of that broadcast. It was worse than Snoopcast.
Yeah,
and. That says
because the exchange was, hey, Bas Rutten, what is this complicated spinning strike in Japanese? Bas Rutten says what it actually is in Japanese, and Marshawn Lynch repeats it terribly, like Ushi banana, Ushi banana. Everybody like, no, stop it, knock it off. As a karateka, once upon a time, to hear Bas Rutten say the correct terminology and then hear Marshawn Lynch hear it too, and then make up words just hurt my heart. But that's just me.
That was pretty bad. All right. So we got a couple of fights in Bellator this weekend in Milan. They're still in Milan. So they're doing a Thursday event and a Saturday event. If I'm not mistaken, the Thursday event is their debut on CBS Sports. But let's just go around the table, give me one fight that stands out to you on these cards. Jay, I'll start with you.
Man, coming off that Bellator rant about how it seemed uninteresting to me. There are 28 fights this weekend from Bellator, and I can't point to more than a couple of them that will be interesting. I don't want to point to Paul Daly, Derek Anderson, because I don't actually know if that will be interesting. Paul Daly is, how old's Paul Daly now? I mean, in fight years, he's about a 470-year-old man. I think he's 37, so he's getting up there too. But God. In terms of interesting matchups on any of them, I guess I'll have to go down to a women's featherweight match with Sinead Kavanagh and Katarina Lenner, who fought on Top 28, because then the Bellator will finally have another Bellator flyweight or featherweight to fight Chris Cyborg in 2 fights. So it's man, Bellator, what are you doing? I'm looking at these cards right this second, and I'm again going, oh my gosh, Charlie Ward, who. You guys remember Charlie Ward in the UFC, right? Remember Galore Bofondo put him through the floor? So Charlie Ward is a co-headliner in one of the events. That tells you the depth of talent or whatnot on these Bellator cards. So I don't know. I'm hurting here, guys.
All right. Jason, any sorry, let me unmute. Any fights on either one of these cards that you want to highlight?
Yeah, one of the things that I really like about Bellator, and I don't know why they have such a strong connection with the Gracie family, probably just because they're willing to take them so much earlier than they probably should. Kewan Gracie is only 1-0. He's training at Hodger Gracie's gym out in England, so it makes all the sense in the world for him to be on a Milan card because it's not too far away. So I think it's I think it's interesting. I love the idea of seeing the guys who basically put this sport on the map in America come through and keep trying to put people into this sport and still trying to build a career. And yes, it's very early on. It's not like UFC caliber or anything like that. It's not like we're looking at one of the prospects beyond all prospects. But I'm excited to see it. I always love to see that lineage, and that's kind of the underdog fight that I'm kind of looking forward to seeing.
All right. Ben, what about you?
Well, as Jay mentioned, this weekend of fights has 28 fights scheduled. That's a lot of room. There's plenty of room to bury bones and bury treasure as well. And Bellator buried, but did not hide from me in the prelims of, I think, the second card. They got Robin Van Roosmalen taking on an 0-0 guy. So there are going to be some bones buried after this dude catches a body. But even you can tell even Bellator isn't proud of this one. They stuck it on the prelims of a card that's not going to be super easy to watch.
I can tell you that Nauza Trujillo, the guy who he's fighting, does have some kickboxing and Muay Thai experience. He's the kind of fighter who on his Facebook has about 14 different silly colored belts all over him. For what that translates over, I don't know. But yeah, Robert.
Well, it makes him the second best MMA fighter from the Canary Islands right now.
And he's not a big man either.
Nope.
All right. Well, I don't really. I'll say, let's say if my wife wasn't home, maybe I'll go more into the Denise Colts fight. Maybe I'll talk about that. Her versus Kate Jackson. Should be entertaining. But I'm gonna stick with kind of a broad spectrum of fights. We have a trifecta of SBG guys at the top of the second card. And I just want to know if Conor McGregor is going to hop over the cage and shove a ref this time. So stay tuned for some extracurricular drama. That sounds like a strong possibility. If he's tweeting about fighting Diego Sanchez, I don't expect rational behavior at this point. So stay tuned. Now, the UFC is, in their second of the 5 weeks on Fight Island, headlined by Holly Holm versus Irene Aldana. Can't say this is quite the star-studded card, but I do think there are a couple of gems on here. I'll start with one that I want to highlight, and that is Carlos Condit versus Court McGee. Those are two guys who probably should not be fighting anymore and who've taken a fair amount of damage over the years, but this matchup, probably the most appropriate you can do with two men at this point in their careers and considering the mileage that they have on them. Condit and McGee are known to go in there and just do what they do without much concern about their personal safety. So at the very least, you bloodthirsty savages might get a little bit of entertainment out of it. Gentlemen, what are some other fights that stick out to you on this card?
You know what, a fight that doesn't stick out to me, and maybe you guys disagree, is Yorgan De Castro versus Carlos Felipe. Because that's the co-main event over ranked fighters that fight lower on the card and bigger names that we've talked about, and that fight that you just mentioned, Ant. So that fight is, I think the two heavyweights have a combined 1-2 in the UFC, and they're a punch somebody in the face until somebody falls down. Now, unless the UFC is trying to market to Cape Verde, I don't understand what that fight's doing on that portion of the card. But I guess if I had to really look at a fight, it would probably be what should be the co-main event, because I truly am interested to see what the UFC has planned for Germaine de Randamie, because they hate her. It's this booking of this fight, as it is not in the co-main event slot, is clear evidence of how much they want to Leslie Smith her, to all the other names you can think of that the UFC has tried to quietly kind of get rid of. And I want to see the matchmaking they're going to do, because Juliana Pena, I mean, she's back now after her catastrophic injury a couple of years ago, but she also hasn't fought in a year and change. Isn't it because of maternity leave? Is this her first fight back since having the baby? I thought it is, and I'm curious how that's going to go too, because, I mean, there's all kinds of things that can happen from a layoff like that. So I think the reason why I'm interested in that fight is because there's so many questions, and none of them are going to be answered by the end of it. And I can't wait.
You would expect the UFC to treat a cop nicer. Maybe just American.
All the things I want to say right now.
It's your show, baby.
Yeah, I just couldn't think of anything funny enough. That's really the only thing that stopped me on that. Without pointing out anybody who I used to work with that's probably a racist cop, but that's another story. Jason, what stands out to you on this card?
Yeah, I mean, you guys mentioned a couple of ones there. Those are probably the top two that you guys just mentioned. I do think it's probably the Carlos Condit death watch in terms of his career if he loses type kind of thing, which is very, very, very saddening to me. But I'm going to go way deep in the card here. Loma Lukbunmi versus Jin Yu Frey. These are really 105-pounders. Loma is literally like the smallest fighter, and I think the entire whole of the UFC. And she's actually had a great career outside of the UFC. And she's been fed some killers since she's come into the UFC. Didn't she fight Angela Hill in her debut? Am I just making that up? Okay.
It was her second fight, but yeah.
She fought Albu first one, but yeah.
Yeah, that is just so rough. And Jin Yu Frey obviously used to be Invicta's 105-pound champion. She's kind of been battle champion. She had some wins and losses there. But they're basically people that are looking to try to make more money in the UFC. And it feels like they're finally getting somebody around their actual weight range. And so I think it'll be a fun fight. I think they're fun fighters to watch. And I don't know if there's necessarily title implications there, but I'm excited to see them kind of get a fair fight, if that makes sense in terms of weight distribution, So.
All right. So I think I speak for everybody when I say I can't wait for another Holly Holm 5-round main event. So let's get this work. That will do it for this edition of Unleashed. Big thanks to Jason Hartley for once again joining the panel. You can check out his fine work on MMA On Point. Coincidentally, you could check out a lot of my fine work there as well. So you can also check out Sherdog.com to see the work of Jay Petrie and Ben Duffy. Avoid the work of racist cops on that site, though. That's another story. So you know what you got to do. Like, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. Stay beautiful, stay positive, and most of all, stay sexy. I'll see you when I see you. Peace.